We're on festival time, people. Festival time.
All right, for the audience tuned in to the live stream, we're going to be starting here in just one moment. Today, myself, Derrick, Broze, and Ramiro, and the audience in person are going to share some insights and strategies, tips and tactics on how to effectively organize a Freedom Cell group. If you already are part of a Freedom Cell group, we hope to provide some tips on how you can maximize the effectiveness of the group. Of course, the overall goal is to enhance freedom by creating alternatives and parallel structures. And the idea is to work together with other people to do that. That's what the Freedom Cell Network is all about. So if you already have a group, we want to help you to learn how to better work on goals, how to come up with plans and strategies. If you don't have a Freedom Cell group, we'll definitely teach you how to get tapped into the network so you can experience all the benefits of working together with freedom lovers. So we're going to start here in just one moment.
You went to go change his shirt, I hope.
I'm going to get a Kratom drink and let's start.
For the folks watching at home, I bring you Agora and Freemason, the cutest little dogs in our Freedom Cell. We came here for the workshop, lady, not dogs.
Is there a rescue adopt-a-thon after the talk?
No. There should be, though. Man, it's been a whole ordeal trying to keep track of these guys.
Yeah, I've seen Agora all over.
Honestly, I've given up at this point. I just am like, he will do what he's going to do, and I just trust that he'll come back to me. But yeah, he has been all over the place. And I'm like, especially at nighttime, I'm like,
all right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I might roll the camera around later as we all interact and stuff, so I hope nobody minds being on camera. All right. So, okay, my name's John Bush, and I've birthed the idea of Freedom Cells. It was something that I'd been thinking about for quite some time because I began to recognize, like I've been doing activism for a long time, and I saw the evolution or the devolution of the Liberty Network, the Liberty Movement. And for a while, you know, there's been all sorts of libertarian and liberty philosophy, freedom stuff going on. But after the Ron Paul campaign in 2008, that like really awoken a sleeping giant, and all these people were like, these ideas really resonate with me, and I want to get active. And a lot of people did politics and stuff, but I was around to watch this transformation of this big loose group of people that all were aligned with their desire for freedom. I got to watch that evolution from politics, from minarchism, where it's like, I think we should have at least some small government that protects private property and does justice. What about the military, right? And all of a sudden, people really started understanding the idea of voluntarism, the idea that we should have a genuinely free society, no government whatsoever, just free people interacting for mutual benefit in a consensual way. But I was like, well, wait a second. There's scores and scores of people that I would meet at these events and stuff and listen to their podcasts. They all recognize that we deserve to be free. They believe and understand the philosophy of liberty, of self-ownership, non-aggression, voluntary exchange. But at the same time, so many of us are still obeying unjust laws or filing taxes or dealing with the banking system, right? And so it's like, what are we missing here? What is the missing thing that can help us to actually experience freedom? So I was never about like a small victory or let's get this guy in office or let's reform government so it's better. For me, it was always like, how can we create genuine freedom, which is a stateless society? If not for the entire earth and every human, which would be nice, at least for our community and people that want freedom. It's not everybody wants freedom. And so what I really boiled down to was like, okay, the missing thing for us is strength in numbers. In order to feel more confident and comfortable in asserting our sovereignty, maybe it would be easier if there was like 150,000 people all doing it together, or even 50,000, or who knows, whatever makes people feel more comfortable. So that's how the strength in numbers idea came about. And then also along the same time, I was starting to hear more and more about small group dynamics. So there's this guy named Nick Ludwig in Minnesota. and he wrote this book called The Small Group Manual. And he talked about how early Christian missionaries would organize in small groups to go out and proselytize the gospel. He even talked about how the early communists in Russia, they had these little groups, these little Soviets, and like small little groups where they would go push the communist agenda and the communist revolution. And then they talked about how their Ron Paul meetup, they had St. Paul, Minneapolis, and it got so big they split it into two, and then they were going to split it even into more smaller groups as it grew and grew. Also at the same time, Stuart Rhodes with the Oath Keepers. He actually got in a lot of trouble recently with the January 6th stuff, but there's this group called the Oath Keepers where people that are law enforcement or military, they renew their oath to the Constitution and they start objecting to other law enforcement or government laws and they ignore them, right? This whole cool thing. Well, he was like, around the time, he's like, we should focus on the county level and on small groups rather than having a national organization. Let's get some power and authority to the small groups. And then the final piece was this guy named Bob Podolsky. He wrote a book called Flourish. He, along with another gentleman named John David Garcia, they did scientific research to determine that 8 people is the optimal number of people for maximum creativity of any group. I forget what the name of that book is called. But they actually did research and they found like, all right, let's test 6 people, let's test 10 people, and they had them do tasks. And they found that the more people you had, the more bureaucracy, the less connected people would be. The fewer people that you had, the less ideas there would be. It was more difficult to get things done. And so he centered on this optimal number of 8. So around this time, I started pulling these ideas together. Actually, when I first started talking about the idea, I was like, oh man, this is pretty risky. I think I could get in a lot of trouble for encouraging people to opt out of the state. That's another thing. A lot of people are fearful. And when we talk about building these groups and ultimately declaring our independence, people are like, you can't do that. You're going to get locked up and stuff. Well, I've been promoting that message since 2014. I'm still free. In fact, I'm more free than I've ever been. So oftentimes we let fear or false events appearing real prohibit us from doing some really groovy things. And at the end of the day, just like having a gun, it's better to have a gun and not need it than to need a gun and not have it. It's better to be a part of the Freedom Cell network and not really need it than to need the support of your brothers and sisters and not have them around because you were afraid to get started because you thought there was some big risk. But anyway, I started talking about the idea. We formed our own little inner cadre group, and it kind of fizzled out from there. In fact, our first inner cadre group, an inner cadre group is like your tight group of around 8 people. Then you link up with other groups of 8 people to form a larger group, but really you're dedicated to that core 8. It doesn't have to be 8, it could be 6, it could be 12, it could really be whatever the hell you want. The idea is just to get together with people and work on common goals for freedom, prosperity, health, all that stuff, right? And so I was promoting the idea. We had a small group, but the group fell apart due to infighting. Because we had this property we were living on and we would do these community gardens. And it turns out like people were like whispering behind my back that I was bossy. But I was like, as a leader, sometimes if you don't ask people to do things, shit doesn't get done. That's how I learned. Instead of being like, hey, do this, be like, hey, would you please do this? It would really help the goal, right? But instead of being like, hey, John, we'd really like to sit down because, you know, we recognize it's your property and you lead a lot of projects, but the way you're speaking with us leads us to feel like there's an authority dynamic or there's something that's not off. Let's have a conversation about how we can all grow through this and become better connected. That's how things ought to have happened, but it didn't happen that way. The group fell apart. Along this time, in addition to that group falling apart, my marriage was beginning to fall apart as well, and I was pretty damn poor. And I could do the poor activist thing for a while, but I couldn't do the poor activist thing with 2 kids. So I'd leaned into entrepreneurship and struggled with that for like 8 years or so. Thankfully, it's clicking now. But thankfully, Derrick Broze, who I've known since like 2010, the idea of Freedom Cells really resonated with him. And it was actually Derrick that took the idea and spread it and turned it into a Freedom Cell network. And he created the website freedomcells.org with the help of our friend Neil. And that's really how it started taking feet. Derrick would talk about it, podcasts, but even back then, it was just an idea that was still being talked about, but it stuck with some people, like our friend Lisa Bowman in Tulsa. Because early on, you know, you had this website with this map, and there wasn't a lot of people. And it took those people that believed in the idea, like Derrick did originally, to be like, there's really something to this. I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to give it a shot, right? So that's kind of the genesis story of the Freedom Cell Network. Before COVID, there was around 1,000 people that were signed up on the website. Now, post-COVID, there's like 33,000 people. We've been working really closely with Ramiro. He's been helping on a lot of the tech stuff and the visionary stuff, and also a lot of the digital spaces, because it's all about meeting in person, but we use technology, we use social media, we use the website as a catalyst to connect and bring people together. So I'm going to share a little bit about the structure and just kind of how it works and what it's all about. And then I want to share a couple things about leadership principles, because if the idea resonates with you, I hope that, like Derrick, you'll take the idea and take ownership in it and help make it your own and help spread it in your own area with your own community. And then we're going to have Derrick share about some of the stuff that he's learned on the road and some of the successes. And we're going to hear from Ramiro about digital spaces and privacy and the role technology plays in the work that we're doing. And then we'd like to open it up, be interactive. You guys can ask questions, ideas, because we're always open to feedback. Right? Okay, so the whole purpose, if you're looking for an elevator pitch to share this idea, I'd just like to share with people, the Freedom Cell Network is a group of people that care about freedom, that are getting together to work on common goals. And that's it. It's just really simple. It doesn't have to be some elaborate thing like eventually we're going to declare independence and create a genuinely free society, upsetting the Great Reset Plan and pushing humanity forward. If you want to do a speech, you could throw that one in, but that might overwhelm some folks. But whatever floats your boat. But really, that's what it's all about. And so you get together with like-minded people. You start with a small group. It all starts with a small group, a small core group, ideally of 8, doesn't have to be 8. And you just work on common goals. Those goals vary depending on what the people's interests are. One thing that we encourage, though, is to start with goals centered around preparedness, right? So early on, we would talk about you get together with your group and you start working on maybe 4 key things. Everyone has food storage. So we got 3 months worth of food storage. I used to say 2 weeks. And then we like actually tapped into our food storage supply during COVID and we're like, holy shit, this is real. So now I encourage people to have like 3 months worth of food storage. Not just food storage though. Obviously it's better to have food production systems that are ongoing. It's good to have a off-grid communication, like some CB radios or ham radio, or at least have encrypted communication, like Signal or some other apps. And then also, it's good for people to learn how to defend themselves and to be proficient in firearms. We share that a lot, and some people are like, whoa. In fact, we had speakers that quit the Greater Reset because they're like, you guys talk about firearms on your website, blah, blah. We since changed that. It's just self-defense in general. I'm a fan of guns. We are in Texas, but the idea is like learn how to survive, how to defend yourself, your community. And then finally, we talk about having a bug out plan. If crap hits the fan, have somewhere to go. Those are just some things that would benefit everyone to work on that realm of preparedness. But it doesn't have to be that, nor does it have to stop there. So for example, if there's families involved, they could set goals on, let's pull the kids out of government school. Let's chip in and purchase a homeschool curriculum. Let's let some of the parents have a date night and all the kids get together and these parents watch them. Because like I got 2 kids, it's hard as hell to raise kids. In fact, it's easier to create a free society than it is to raise children. Shit. But it takes a village, and that's really what it's all about. Let's say there's a metaphysical or a spiritual group, and they're like, we're really into becoming the best people that we can, dealing with trauma, shadow work. So they get together and they have goals like we're going to do yoga together, we're going to meditate together, we're going to talk about past trauma and work on healing together. Right, but really it could be anything. Maybe there's entrepreneurs that want to go do a mastermind or go to a conference. Work together on common goals. That's really what it's all about. We purposely try to create things, like make things loose so people can kind of take ownership, because we don't really know what the best practice is at this point. We have ideas about what we've learned in our own experience, but maybe it's not the best idea. That's why this whole cell thing, like imagine cells in the body. The cells communicate information with one another. Like they learn how to combat a virus with antibodies. String them up, there's no such thing as viruses. All right. I don't know where I fall in that debate. I got sick with something. I don't know what it was, but it was very foreign, and I'm pretty sure it was the COVID thing or whatever it was. But either way, I digress. So the idea is we all educate one another. So this group's like, well, you know, we tried not NVC, but it turned out that nonviolent communication had these weaknesses. Or this group is like, we tried to use the sociocracy governance model, but it turned out that just straight consensus worked better with the small group. But once we had more than, 15 people or so, the consensus thing started causing these problems. We all communicate with one another. And back to the body analogy, the health of the individual cell is dependent on the health of the body, the network, just as the health of the body is dependent on the health of the cell. So it's important that we share information, we share best practices, and we share strategies with one another. Right? Okay, so we got our small group. We're working together on common goals. Then you go out and recruit other people to be part of the network. You say, hey, I found this really cool group. I thought I was all alone in this area. We were able to pull our kids out of government school and do this homeschool co-op thing. It's working really well for us. If you're interested, we'd love to invite you to a meeting or go grab a drink or grab a coffee and share how this group might benefit you. Because I understand, you know, you're concerned about all the COVID stuff or whatever that commonality or common thread is that you guys connect on. And so you grow the network from there. And the idea is eventually we have these regional groups. For example, in Central Texas, we have the Central Texas Freedom Cell Network. There's around 700 people on our Telegram group, but that overall Central Texas group is broken up into the South Austin group. Shout out Crystal. The San Marcos group, the Williamson County group. There's a group up here, our friend Rita, like literally Freedom Cell members that have a homestead 20 minutes down the road, and they're working with the local community, building shared value based on shared values. And so in Central Texas, we have these smaller groups that meet more often, that do more projects together, but then we have the whole body that supports each one of the groups. That's in Central Texas. Derrick's got his thing going on in Michoacan and in Morelia, but then the same thing in Texas, there's a group that has all, and then in Texas, you got DFW, Central Texas, Houston, right? Those are all connected. In Mexico, there's groups all over. Super excited to hear about the growth of the network there. They're all doing their thing. They're more connected based on geographic proximity and being able to support one another. But as a whole, we're building out this global network where everyone is supporting one another. Everyone is benefiting one another. Along the side, we're doing these alternative systems, cryptocurrency. We're hiring one another. We're working with one another. We're building out work trades. We're building out homeschool co-ops. We're all supporting one another. And the idea is through the network, through working with other people, we work on common goals around the parallel institutions and the parallel structures. And then through the network as a whole, hopefully, eventually, we can create the infrastructure that enables us to decouple ourselves completely from the state system. Because you're not going to be able to do the anarchy thing all on your own. It takes a quality of life. It takes, I don't want to sacrifice my standard of living to be free. I want to be free and be free in style and still have a good life and still have the plumber I can call and still have commerce amongst my friends, right? So that's really what it's all about. That's the idea of the Freedom Cell Network. That's the purpose of the Freedom Cell Network. And we're hoping that eventually when we have so many people and we essentially are no longer participating in the state systems for the most part, or perhaps some people have one foot in the state system, the centralized system, and one foot on the other side. We've exited, some people have exited and worked on building, but once we build out that infrastructure, the hope is that it makes it easier for people to peacefully transition to the life of a sovereign because they have their friends to back them up, because they have a potential employment opportunity that doesn't require the jab, right? Because they can engage in commerce, they can fulfill their wants and needs and not have to worry about their bank account getting shut down because they got people that use our little sovereign currency or our own crypto or a barter exchange or whatever. That's the whole idea. All right, so let me share just some ideas about leadership because I think it's really important that we foster a understanding of what it takes to lead. Not just to lead as in to share ideas with people and to hopefully get them to quote unquote follow, right? We try to say this is like a leaderless thing, but nonetheless, there's a dynamic amongst people where some people don't want to start the group. Derrick was saying this the other day. They don't want to start the group, but they'd be happy to join a group. So, but we need the folks to lead in order to create the opportunity for the folks that are just wanting to hop on board and find some connection there. So when it comes to leadership, I think one thing that's really important is to lead by example. Is to, you know, you're preaching about this, that, and the other, to walk the walk as much as you possibly can. And in the areas that there's an inconsistency, right? Like I talk about privacy and technology, but I still have Gmail. I'm trying to be like Derrick and Ramiro as much as I can. I look up to these guys in their tech world.
Matters that you're trying. Bro.
That's right, I'm trying. But I recognize it's not just a blind thing where I'm like, oh, I'm totally fine. Gmail's so convenient. It's like, yeah, I know that Gmail's not the optimal thing for what it is that we're trying to do. I set up the Proton Mail. I'm starting to use CryptPad more often with some of our projects, right? So it's important to lead by example. Another thing, a lot of people in this community and in general, a lot of people sometimes feel awkward with other humans, even just having a conversation. We all have our own insecurities. I know when I have some more Delta 8 gummies, I sometimes get insecure, and I was like, oh, John's always so extroverted and outgoing. Sometimes I feel insecure too. But what helps me, and what I would encourage folks, because it's all about connecting and talking, but some people feel so insecure, they don't want to go out in the social setting because they're like, I don't want to say something weird, or people are going to judge me, or I just never know how to start a conversation with someone I don't know. The important thing is to remember that almost each and every one of us experience that same thing, right? It's kind of the same thing. It's like, imagine everyone in their underwear. We're all a bunch of fucking weirdos with insecurities, so we might as well jam together. So the point is, don't be afraid to go out there and put yourself out there. In fact, growth, internal growth, but also growth of our network of free people, it happens when you're uncomfortable. The work that we're doing sometimes is going to make us feel uncomfortable. Maybe we're putting ourselves at risk. Maybe we're going to quit a job to start an entrepreneurial thing. Maybe we're not going to claim some of our income on our property taxes or our income tax, right? You know, there's property tax for your business assets too. I hadn't paid it yet, but I keep getting letters about it. Probably should deal with that. Anyway, cut that part. It's in order to grow personally and as a group, we need to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And sometimes that means stepping outside of our comfort zone. And so you got to go out there. You got to put yourself out there. You got to make stuff happen. A lot of times people will get together like, we got our group together, and they just kind of like hang out and talk, which is fine. You got to build that bond. You got to build that relationship, but it's all about getting activated, doing, building, creating. So I would encourage folks to also study up on project management. We're big fans of having a strategic plan. So you get your group together and you're like, all right, guys, what are we going to do? All right, well, how many people are almost completely food self-sufficient, or at least get most of their food or half of their food from non-grocery store sources? Chances are most people in most groups, when they're just getting started, are mostly dependent on the grocery store. So there's a great place we can start. Okay, let's come up with a mission surrounding food in our community. Okay, the mission is, no, I'm sorry, let's come up with a vision. You start with a vision. That's like the ideal. It's where you want to go. So our vision is the local Freedom Cell network is almost completely food self-sufficient, meaning they get most of their food from local sources, whether we grow it on our own or we work with the local farm or we have a meat share or whatever, right? That's our vision. That's where we want to go. The mission is, in order to become almost completely food self-sufficient, the local Freedom Cell network will work together weekly on executing a variety of common projects or whatever, right? So you have your vision and your mission. It kind of just gives you a sense of purpose. It also creates an environment where people are like, we want to do this. You're like, well, for this quarter at least, for these next 3 months, we're going to focus on this mission and this mission alone, so we don't spread ourselves too thin. So let's table that. Let's revisit that after the next few months, right? It's about getting people on the same page and then just kind of creating something that you can be held accountable to. But then it's like, what do we do now? You come up with some goals. Okay, so one goal is to create a meat share program. Another goal is to do a round of permablitzes where we make sure every person in our group at least has a garden going on their property. The next goal is we set up a farmer's market stand ourselves and start selling wares and building relationships with the local farmers, right? So you write this down. You have your vision, where you want to go. You have your mission, how you're going to get there. Then you have your goals. And then now you have these goals. You're like, okay, here's our goal. We're going to have every single person have a garden on their backyard. How are we going to accomplish that goal? Now you have objectives. Okay, let's set a meeting for each person's house. Every 2 weeks, we're going to go to some person's house. All right, the next objective. Let's create a fund where we all chip in to purchase the materials to buy the food production systems for everybody's property, right? And then you start working on these projects. It's going to take, if you have someone in your group that's like a born leader and they're like, all right, guys, let's go. Here's what we're going to do. You do this, let's work together, blah, blah, blah. That's great. But oftentimes people don't have that. So sometimes it means that you got to step up and take that leadership role. Also, far too often people are like, I put a pin on the map and there's nobody around me. There's nobody in the Freedom Cell network. And they're like, damn you, Derrick. Why isn't there someone in my area with the Freedom Cell network? But really, it takes somebody to take leadership. So we always say like, oh, great. Well, that means that you got to put the first pin. And if you build it, they will come. There's stories of that. People are like, I went to the website, nothing was there. I went back a few months later, nothing was there. So I said, you know what? To hell with it. I'm going to put a little pin on the map and start a little cell. And then wouldn't you know it, there were other people that were doing the same thing, waiting for that first person to take that first step. So I'm going to encourage folks to be aware of like leadership literature. John C. Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. There's this great book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm way into it. Study about project management and getting shit done, because that's what we need. We need doers. All right, so does anybody have any questions? We'll kind of do like, I'll do a thing, then we'll open up to questions. Derrick will do a thing, we'll open up to questions, then Ramiro will do his thing. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? The purpose of the Freedom Cell Network, how it's supposed to work. I want to be clear too. Oftentimes we talk about the 8 groups, and then the 8 groups link up with blah, 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 and people get confused, and it leads to like inaction, because they're like, I want to make sure I'm doing it right. To be crystal clear, the main thing to take away is working together with small groups of people to fulfill common goals. That's it. The structure is less important than getting together and working on cool shit with your friends. Yes?
So, I know it's the whole point almost is for it to kind of proliferate in ways that you don't expect it to meet the needs in the cell, right? Like it's supposed to kind of auto-generate its own solutions when it becomes sufficient, right? I guess my question is, do you have any nascent ideas for fabrication? You know, so that like you know, I think of like PVC, I think of plumbing, I think of metallurgy, I think of electronics. Like, do you have any nascent thoughts even on, you know, what that might look like? You know, not necessarily saying like set out a framework for that. That's for whoever it is, right? But the way I kind of see this going is it's almost like we have the technology at the time and it's better than what we had, and so it's almost like a regression out of the cities back into the farmlands that, you know, our worker ancestors kind of grew out of, you know, the poverty that they were in. But I don't have an image presently of maintenance, I guess. You know, it's almost like emblematic that you have farm equipment rusted to, you know, uselessness in the field, like right there, you know.
So are you asking what are some like starter frameworks to help kickstart, get things going?
Kind of like has that been a consideration, I guess, for, you know, for you, for Broze, or anyone else who may have been contributing to the conceptualization, I guess, you know?
Yeah, in all honesty, I meant to say this earlier. I started to share it, but I purposefully made it like a blank slate for people to take ownership and experiment, because again, I didn't want it to be like this thing where like, we got to do it this way, this is the best way to do it, because I don't know the best way to do it. I've never built a free society before. It's my first time. But at the same time, having that open-ended thing, I think, has left people to kind of be like, well, what should we do? Because like that dynamic I shared earlier, there is a leader-follower dynamic. So I think one thing to do is to really, like we're doing right now, to share what our best practices are, and not to say this is most definitely the best way to do it, although maybe over time we ascertain what is the best way to do it if we have our common goals, right, our common values. So I think it actually would behoove us to take more of a proactive role and say, like, this is what to do to get started, A, B, C. Report back to your community on how things are going and how things are working. So we do have a Freedom Cells manual. If you go to freedomcells.org to register, and it lays out a lot of the stuff that I just shared, and it lays out how to start with the goals. It lays out how to find people in your area. So I would recommend starting there. But really the best thing to do, I think, as far as what we ought to do and how we ought to do it, is get together with your group and then just have a jam session. All right, guys, what areas are we lacking? Where do we need to up our exit and build skills, right? What does that look like? What are our values? What are we interested in? And then it kind of gets birthed from there. But a simple thing is to start with that preparedness stuff, because that's something that would benefit everybody, whether you have kids or not, whether you eat meat or you're vegan. That preparedness stuff would definitely be critical foundational starting points. Okay, cool. All right. There'll be more questions that come up. We're going to roll through each.
Cool. So awesome. Thank you, John. So I missed the beginning of John's, but for those who are unaware, I'm sure John shared this, but I heard John speak in Austin in 2015 about what he was calling the Central Texas Mutual Aid Society at that time, which was the beginning of the Freedom Cell Network. And we're talking about mutual aid groups and decentralized organizing and all that stuff I've been interested in for years. And then I think around that time is when John started to use the freedom cells term, and I got really inspired by that and went back to Houston. I was working with a group called the Houston Freethinkers, which was sort of like our proto freedom cell. I learned a lot about organizing humans in that time, and that led to what I would do with freedom cells. And a lot of the goals that John listed were the ways that we started. So our first freedom cell in Houston, which was about 5 people, we started first with, let's make sure everybody has a emergency bag, you know, sometimes called a bug out bag, just something to be useful in times of emergency. And I think it is helpful to start with the preparing stuff like John was saying, but also to remember that, you know, it shouldn't be seen as like some sort of negative thing. They have this negative connotation about prepping, which is the root word of prepping. I mean, the real word is just preparing, right? They want us to believe that it's some kind of crazy thing to be prepared. But I know that in Houston, where we're from, you get hurricanes, you get freak storms. You know, Texas just got hit with this winter storm, and a lot of people went without power. Well, if you're the kind of person who was prepping and thinking ahead or had a freedom cell, that impact would be lessened, you know. So that's kind of the idea, is that we're building this support system. And so we took inspiration from what John was saying, went back to Houston, we started, let's get our emergency bag together in case of some emergency. Let's start getting some backup supply of food. Let's start talking about encrypted forms of communication. Like, we had those basic goals that we, you know, that we were focusing on, and we just started working with there. And as John said, I just kind of started putting out a lot of content about freedom cells, all kinds of videos. I put out dozens of videos on how freedom cells could be applied to peaceful parenting, local food production, ideas like immigration, self-defense, like all kinds of different ways that this concept, which is pretty much limitless. You know, I prefer the way we have established it, the way that John sort of first put it out there in a really decentralized way, because, like, to the question, we could try to come up with some centrally planned idea of this is the best way to organize a freedom cell, and this is the thing that's going to lead to the best outcomes, but we don't know that. You know, we do have best practices and things that he's tried, that I've tried, that other people have told us they've tried now that it's become a real movement. But ultimately, it's up to each cell and each group to decide what way do we want to make our decisions and what topics do we want to focus on, right? Because in Houston, we were focused on growing food. We were focused on having some backup food. We were focused on certain things that fit our environment and our needs. I think food matters to everybody, but generally speaking, there are going to be some objectives and goals that might not be important to somebody in a totally different country, in a different city, in a different state, right? So that's why freedom cells is kind of amorphous like that. So I've been involved for the last 5-6 years. I started the first website, and then together we've co-created the most recent website, and we have a new one coming out very soon. And as I was saying earlier, for those who heard my talk, I've done now 3 tours of the United States and a tour of Mexico for like a total of over 130 talks around both countries, talking since 2017. When we were talking about freedom cells back in 2017, other than a few people who really got it, most people were like, yeah, that sounds interesting, but life's still pretty chill. I've got Netflix and internet and AC and food in the fridge. It wasn't COVID 1984 yet, so people weren't in a panic mode, right? So before COVID, there was people who were like vaguely aware of freedom cells. I talked about James Corbett and plenty of other people, but it wasn't until COVID where people started taking it seriously and really doing it. And thankfully, through the website and the Greater Reset and stuff like that, people have told us they've met each other through the network. That's one aspect of it. It is a social thing. A lot of us are in situations where we feel alone often. Tell me when I got like 2 minutes. If we feel alone often. And so in that space, like, you know, that could be a very dark space. So the first step of just realizing, oh my God, there's other people in my community. That's amazing. But then, of course, the bigger goal with freedom cells is to go beyond just being a social kind of gathering. There's a lot of groups that just get together and talk and gather. We want freedom cells to be like, the way I've been promoting it to people is it's not meant to just be another kind of activist group that you join and go to meetings once every couple weeks and come home and nothing changes. Like, this is meant to be like, go to those other activist groups and recruit the most active, motivated people and start a freedom cell with them. Like, find those people who are just as activated and motivated as you, and those be the people that you start the freedom cell with, so that it doesn't just turn into just a social group. And so after traveling the United States 3 times, talking about freedom cells over the last 5 years, and now touring Mexico, I do feel like I've learned some important, you know, lessons about what works in some ways and what I've seen working in some areas, and then common mistakes. All over the US and all over Mexico, everybody has the same problems. It's kind of interesting. And from what I've learned from other freedom cells that are active in Australia and Europe and elsewhere, the problems are pretty like they're perennial. These are the same issues. And I wanted to go over some of those as well as to share some of the tips. And I'm going to be super brief about this because Ramiro's got some information to share. But what we really want to do, and I hope you guys will stick around for this, is after we share our information, we're going to break off into a couple freedom cells and do an exercise, because in my experience, that's the best way for people to understand this concept, is just do it. So we'll give everybody who wants to participate, we'll probably break off into 2 or 3 groups and give the group a prompt of how would your freedom cell handle this situation, and then we'll share it, and it'll be an exercise. So please stick around for that. But I'm just going to go over some of these tips that I've seen. You know, the first thing I will say is that if you're trying to get involved, the first most basic thing is to create a cell or to join a cell, right? So if you're not from this area and you're not connected to the Central Texas Freedom Cell Network, that would be one of the first steps you want to do. Or if you are from this area. If you're not from this area, you'd want to go to the website and check and go join, create a free profile, put your interests, your skills, put your location. Don't put your home address. We don't want it. And just put the town you live in. And then search the maps to find if there are groups already near you, to find if there are people near you. If there is a cell near you, maybe check it out. If it has similar goals and motivations, join it, message them, attend their upcoming meetings, and see what happens in the real world. The whole goal is to use the website to connect with people in the real world and then leave the website behind. You know, it's just kind of a place marker. Or if there's no groups, search and see if there's people on the member map. And if there are people near you, you can search 5, 10, 15 miles. And if you find people, check out their profiles, see if they have similar interests. If they do, message them, try to follow up with them, see if y'all can go out for a group meeting in a public place where everybody's safe and get to know each other, right? Get to vet each other and see if, like, hey, do we want to start a group together? It is like building a community, like a relationship with several other people. It's like working with different people who are like, hey, we have common motivations and goals. It's not always easy. And you might not necessarily work long-term with the first freedom cell you create or join. Maybe you end up working with some people for a period of time and realize your goals aren't really exactly the same. And so let's just be mature about it and say, hey, I want to go start or join another freedom cell. You guys have different interests, right? So creating a cell, joining a cell, you can join the website. Telegram has become a huge place where people are organizing freedom cells. At the moment, there's 17 freedom cells that have been created around Mexico just on Telegram in the last 2 years, and hundreds across the US, into India, Australia, all across Europe and Canada. I mean, it's really just amazing to see. So people are organizing on Telegram, the website. Whatever platforms you organize on, I do encourage you to have at least a backup on our website, because we don't censor that. We don't do anything to that data. So if your group gets censored or taken down on Telegram and everybody loses contact, the idea would be you still have a home on the website to connect, and you can message each other and have groups and all that fun stuff. So that's kind of like the basics thing, right? But one of the common issues I see is that there's groups out there, they have a Telegram group or a group on our website, and there's 500 people in there, but then they host a meeting and there's 5 people that show up, right? There's lurkers. There's people who like, maybe I'm going to move there one day. I'm just going to come join the group and observe. Or they join and they never interact or whatever, right? So I've seen different groups trying different strategies. One of them is just creating a filter. So the Portland Free Thinkers, that's the name of one of the freedom cells out there. They created a group that on Telegram is just a public group that you have to follow just for events. So all it does is tell you when they have upcoming meetings and events. And once you come in person 2 or 3 times, then they give you access to like the actual freedom cell group for people who are showing a legitimate interest, because they don't want just anybody to join who's never going to come and never going to attend, right? I've seen other freedom cells like in India where they literally create kind of like an application process to get the most motivated people. Like, hey, are you willing to attend in-person meetings? Some people join and they're never going to come out. But if you're trying to do real world action, you need people willing to come out, right? So you can create a filter by having a channel that people have to follow. And then once they get more integrated, you give them access to the inner cell. You can create an application process. We have in Morelia, where we live, we have a public Morelia cell that anybody can join. And that's the public one where hundreds of people are in there. But we promote our upcoming events. And once we see who comes to those events, then we start telling them, hey, we're having a freedom cell meeting in person. Those things might not be put on the internet. They might only be given to people who have shown they're coming in person, right? So that's one way to reduce on some of the clutter, is to create a filter for the way that you let people in. And you know, finding the action ready people, that's the most important part. And I do want to say that I have a book that goes deeper into this. You can download it for free. It's theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. In there, I wrote 15 tips on freedom cells that go a little bit more deep into what I'm sharing today. But the other thing, and John kind of touched on some of this, so I'm going to skip over most of it, but the common goals, establishing your common goals, that's important, obviously, to know what the heck are we trying to do? What's the purpose of our freedom cell? It's not meant to be just a group that talks about politics. There's 5 principles of the Freedom Cell Network. Localization, focus on building local, decentralized groups. Localization, decentralization. Apolitical. We are not forming freedom cells to run candidates for office. We're not promoting politicians on the left or the right or any party, Green Party, Libertarian Party. We're a political movement, right? And solutions focused. This is not a group to just come and share the news articles that you want to share about the latest, scary thing out there. If you do that, the idea is to come and say, hey guys, have you heard this scary bill they're trying to pass? How are our freedom cells going to handle this? Let's brainstorm on strategies, not just here's this thing, right? In fact, we have to sometimes ban people for that, and they get all triggered. Oh, you guys are censoring people. It's like, no, we're trying to create a platform. I think everybody knows there's hundreds of spaces out there that you can learn about all the scary, bad things going on in the world. There's not so many places where people are talking about solutions. So we've make it solutions focused. So localization, decentralization, apolitical, solutions focused, and nonviolent. This is a nonviolent, peaceful movement. We do believe in self-defense, but we're not organizing to go storm the Capitol. We're organizing to exit and build, right? So those principles are very prominent to remember. Like, so if you're not focused on decentralization and building local groups, you're not doing freedom cells. If you're promoting politics, you're not doing freedom cells. It doesn't mean you can't do those things in your life separately, but I'm talking about when you're forming these groups together, the goal isn't to promote Trump or Joe Biden or any of that stuff at all. The goal is to say, how are we going to take care of our own lives? Do I need to grow my own food with these people? Do I need to get off big tech, etc.? Right? So have common goals, have regular gatherings if you can do it on a weekly level, monthly level. But again, focus on people who actually want to get shit done. You can have the social aspect and the action. Here's another simple, basic tip that I've seen that might be useful to some of you. A lot of people want to come to these events and have social hour because a lot of times we have to put on masks, both physical and metaphorical, around other people. We can't be ourselves, right? Then we come to a social gathering like this and people just want to talk their asses off all night. And it's great, but then I have people come to me and they're like, this is the third meeting I've been to and we haven't got anything done. It's cool, like I'm meeting new people, but we're not doing anything. So I'm just they lose momentum. They'll move on. They'll stop coming because nothing's happening, right? So if you want to do the social thing, make it clear, create the proper container. Hey guys, we're getting together for an hour and a half of business. We're going to focus on what are our goals of our freedom cells. We're going to just be talking about these solutions for the first hour and a half. If you're not interested in that, that's fine. Come at 7:30 and we'll do the social mixer for the hour and a half afterwards. But if you want both, come early, right? So kind of create that container so people know what they're getting involved in. Because the social part is part of the community. But if that's all there is, then the shit's gonna hit the fan and we're just gonna still be partying, So that's my short time. I'm gonna pass it to Ramiro so we can get to the exercise.
Give it up for Derrick and for John. It's awesome to have all of us in one space together. It's rare that happens. These guys are always throwing conferences in a bunch of countries, but we're finally all here. Thank you guys for being here today. I'm Ramiro. In 2019, I showed up to a Freedom Cell meeting kind of like this, and I met Derrick Broze, and I was like, yo, bro, I do websites. And that was the start of voluntary collaborative efforts that led into Freedom Cells. And if you look at the bottom of the site, you see everyone who worked on the site, voluntary collaborative efforts. And that's exactly what Freedom Cells is. It's this thing that we come to do together, and we can only have that happen by knowing each other. So technology is a really important tool, right? We're all here at Flote Fest. This all started from a digital dimension, and now it's been brought into physical. So as Derrick and John have both been saying, freedomcells.org is a way for that digital to come into the physical. I want to talk a little bit about what it means for us to be organized and get things done with people. The purpose we have in life is we're facing overwhelming problems and we don't have very many resources. So that means that we have to start thinking creatively and we have to start working together because the odds are stacked against us a little bit. So using technology, you can create a safe space for us to do that. And the way freedomcells.org decides to do it is you have a profile and you begin to tell people about yourself in this way. And I think that it's okay to get to the point, you share what you are interested in, even if you are kind of bullshitting, because at least that is something that drives you and it'll put you in the place where you can learn from someone more knowledgeable or more experienced. So it's about this sharing that needs to take place. And so I have a few strategies for you that will work at the local level. Someone needs to step up and do some data collection. Now you're like, whoa, data collection, what do you mean? Well, I mean data in the good sense, kind of our essence, the essence of each one, and have a central place that we can store that and reference that. So a really awesome tactic to do is create a business directory of your local town. You can use like an Excel spreadsheet, but of course you wouldn't use Excel, you would use something like CryptPad.fr, which I've talked about recently at the Greater Reset. But CryptPad.fr, it's this tool, it's a collaborative document suite within it, and then you can go ahead and start filling people in with a spreadsheet, right? what's your name? What are your talents? What's your general part of town? What's your email? If it's more privileged information, right? Personal information. And of course, you only want to let people on to this information after they've shown that they can come up and be a helpful part. But once you have that, this is capital. This is human capital. This is information capital. And that's so important. We need to be able to use data for our own goods. So having that, you have just a little nice black book of everyone in your cell that when someone new comes in and you know there's a good feeling about them, you can connect each other. Now you can take it one step further, evolve this idea and turn it to an agora. That way, instead of going to your local HEB or Walmart or whatever, you simply look up what produce you need to in this spreadsheet, and then you find that their Bitcoin address is right next to it. It couldn't really be easier, right? So I'm going to be talking tomorrow, actually, Monday, and at 11 about more technical strategies, but I talked a little bit about the spreadsheet. What's also really helpful is getting a document together. The throat is the vehicle that we take our ideas and inspirations and put them into person. So is the hand, because you can write that down and you can always refer back to it. You should be working on documentation. You should be writing to each other and putting names, putting structures. You're literally breathing life into these entities. You've got all these amazing organizations. What are you going to create? What entity are you going to create to change this world? And that way you kind of all adopt this flag and work on it together. So make a document what you're doing, your goals, your visions, what you want to accomplish, and come back and keep yourself in check. Which leads me to my next point, is that we're just kind of lazy if there is not a metronome that is bringing us together on a regular cadence. We're just going to lose track of projects. I think we all suffer from this. It's kind of hard to keep something going, and so you just have to create regular meetings that are expected. And luckily we have technology, which makes this so much easier. I know that all three of us and a lot of people I know are just on constant video calls and phone calls, because that's where this stuff needs to get hashed out. So if you have something regular weekly for your Freedom Cell, you know that's always a place to disseminate information. Now I want to talk about a few other strategies, and one is when you should have a newsletter, right? So you should have weekly calls and a newsletter. They don't have to be weekly calls, but regular calls. The last thing is you want to be able to grow your Freedom Cell. Once you start to get an established rapport with each other and you have projects that you're working on, now you need to bring the interest from outside. We're not just here to change our lives, we're here to change the world. So you go out and your entity starts to get bigger and you start to bring people in and you show them the alternatives. If you guys are collaborating on a farm together, it's time to go out to a farmer's market. It's time to walk up to people in the street and be like, hey, do you want to eat nutritious food again? Because we got the hookup, you know? So you start going outside your boundaries. You start printing out flyers with QR codes that go to your website, or maybe they're the link to your Telegram group. And you start bringing people in, and with that comes growth, and monetarily, human capital, like I mentioned, and more opportunities. That's what it's all about. There's a member directory, there's the city directory, which I talked about, which is super helpful. Support stores that didn't enforce mask mandates, didn't follow along with the bullshit. And now I just want to kind of open it up to you. You guys have any questions about what you should do tech-wise for your Freedom Cell?
Did you recommend a messaging app?
No, I didn't recommend a messaging app. I think Telegram is probably your best bet for a safe step towards privacy. For those who are really looking to do something serious, I recommend XMPP, which is a decentralized messaging protocol. And you can find more out about this at takebackourtech.org. That's my educational initiative, where I've written about how to switch to Linux, how to switch to privacy phones. And that's a really amazing baseline for every member of your Freedom Cell to have. Because when you're operating at such a high capacity, you want to be able to move silently, right? That is your freedom. Okay, excellent. I think we're going to get on to the exercise. Yeah.
So if there's like a contest, like you want to do a Freedom Cell that doesn't get out, would that even be a possibility?
A 4-unit condo?
Yeah. Pretty good size. It's 6,000 square feet.
His question is, if you're in a condo and you don't want to get out of the city, could you still do a Freedom Cell? I don't think we touched on that, but it's definitely not just exclusive about getting out of the city. We've got friends like in the Houston Freedom Cell who are still, I think they're staken, but they're very committed to trying to keep Houston free in the city. And so they're doing freedom cells in the city. Mickey's one of them, right? That are doing good things in the city, right? So it's not just a like move to the country thing. The exit and build idea, we promote that idea, but you can do freedom cells in the suburbs, the city, the country. It's just about, like John said, getting together with people and meeting those common goals.
And we'll still all link up. Maybe like if stuff gets bad, the food is grown out on the homesteads, and we have the trade routes that go into our brothers and sisters into Gulag.
Hey guys, I want to invite everybody who is interested in participating in this freedom cell exercise. We're going to actually do a 10 to 12 minute exercise to come a little closer here. And the last thing I want to mention before that, I made a summary of some of the things John has shared and Ramiro. And look, these are the most common fears we hear, guys, of being arrested, the government coming after you, death, like they're going to kill us, or people who are just afraid of failing, who don't want to start because they're afraid of failing. Those are just for awareness sake. Those are the kind of things that are holding a lot of people back. There are people who have straight up told us, like, I believe in freedom cells, but I won't join publicly because, and look, everybody's got to decide how to interact, but it doesn't serve any of us to live in fear. If we live in fear, we choose to do nothing, they've already won, right? So yeah, just so we're aware, those are the common fears. The common complaints I hear, and this is maybe something to keep in mind as you're doing your practicing of your freedom cell. Ramiro was talking about this, like keeping each other motivated and lack of action. Like you come to an event like this, you get super pumped, you go home for a couple of weeks, but then after a while you get back into your routine, maybe you lose the excitement, life goes on, right? It can be difficult to keep each other motivated, let alone yourself. So having regular interactions is vital. Lack of action, this is what I'm hearing from people. I'm getting people together, they don't want to do anything. I can't keep them motivated. They just want to talk about politics, etc. So just for awareness sake, if you're doing those things and you're involved in the freedom cell, there are other people who are getting frustrated by it, and the people who are most motivated will leave eventually if they don't see action. So the prompt we're going to do, let's go ahead first and split off into groups of 8. I don't know, we think got about 50 people?
Yeah, there's a little over 50 people, so we should be able to find groups of 8.
So let's get one group here, first freedom cell here, group 8.
We're going to give you all a scenario, and then you break down what you guys would do in your local group in that scenario.
So just get in groups of 8, whoever wants to participate. There's one there.
And the camera's going to come be one of y'all's group members.
Okay, so get your group of 8, everybody. Try not to lose there. All right, you guys got one here? You got a group of 8 here? We got a group of 8 here?
All right. Here, the camera's going to be here with y'all just so people can see what's going on. So, damn, tighten up. There we go.
Okay, so one freedom cell, second freedom cell, third.
Yep. All right. Let the FBI in on y'all's plans.
Okay, hey guys, we're going to give you the prompt for what you're going to focus on for the next 10 minutes. So,
you pay attention, everybody. Here's the scenario that you guys are going to game out what you would do with your group.
So you want to pretend, first of all, that you guys are all neighbors. Imagine that you do live in a local environment. That's what's connected to you, right? Okay. So we've just heard an announcement. That in 7 days, everybody who has attended a freedom cell meeting is going to have their bank account.
Gonna have to what? Got him.
How is your freedom cell going to prepare for that? You have a week to figure out what you're going to do with your money in the bank, how you're going to put group strategy. We're going to take 12 minutes and come back. Choose one person to come back and share with the group once we come back together.
You guys got the prompt?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, cool. All right.
The prompt is that we just got the news that in 7 days that anybody who's going to run a freedom cell is going to have their bank.
All right, you got 10 minutes.
First of all, we get our money out.
Yeah, so get money out of the bank immediately.
Day one.
What about the people who have some
reinvest into other tangible items?
Yes.
Well, who here rents?
I
Okay, because a lot of transactions I think are like solely
yeah,
digital.
that
So,
is
like,
a problem.
Yeah. So like, I think step 2 would be figuring out how to like still meet your responsibilities without conventional
Getting kicked out.
monetary. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That would be a domino effect.
I want you to stop paying your ridiculously overpriced debts like land, house, and car.
Yeah, join one of the groups. We're all working together.
But we still have financial obligations.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and then we're just dealing with this 7-day thing, so that's a good point.
So like
So we would
when
have
you pay
to
your cell phone,
Just pretend
that's a digital transaction, right?
let's say we have money in the bank.
So yeah, so we take it out. What about putting it in gift cards?
Well,
Yeah,
gift cards
gift
in order, like Visa debit cards, or later, like
Yeah.
bills and matrix.
Yeah.
But then to store your wallet, you don't want to maybe instead of cash for the mattress, like crypto, right? So yeah, I think we would want to say who
But can't they crypto too though?
It depends on the
They did that in
account.
Canada.
It depends on like what the what platform. Like Ramiro was just basically like the people that were using Coinbase, they got their shit first. Coinbase was really happy to just go ahead and cooperate with whatever. But then there were some people, something monkey, I think.
As long as you have like the keys to your wallet.
Yes, as long as you have it all on a decentralized exchange. I'd be interested in knowing who already has money outside of the bank, and we could follow that momentum. Like, for example, who has a safe that you can put your hard money in? So if you didn't have time to turn your money in 7 days into ammo or crypto, who at least can put the money safely in their house and keep it going?
Who will bank for us?
What's that? Or who could be the bank? Or who? Yeah. And so who has the most experience in storing money outside of the bank as is? And like for example, we have that safe and various forms of our thing. So we'd be interested in being okay for $35 academy every year. Some sort of fireproof safe for that. And then we come up with a brainstorm list maybe about where, I don't know if we all have similar places where we feel our money is most safe, you know, and everyone has different amounts. So you might want to be like, I'm taking, you know, my 5 figures and I'm buying rounds. Someone else says, I don't want to buy ammo, I want to put it on my Exodus wallet, you know?
I would say with the rent thing too, right? That before we go, oh, we can't pay rent. Try to get as much way to pay in paper. You can go to your bank and say, I'm not paying digital. Get my, so I'm basically everything digital. Like, I could call them all that day and say, hey, switch me over, send me a paper bill. This happened. I'm gonna have to pay you in cash or whatever. And figure it out. But then you would maybe have to do some of that.
And there's like third-party companies that'll like write checks for you, like official checks for you that you can pay your rent with, and you can send them crypto and stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Money orders. You can get that shit from like convenience stores.
I think everybody should also reach out, or kind of like when you're trying to start a business, an angel investor, reach out to your brother or your closest friend and say, hey, I'm getting screwed. What kind of network do you have outside of our true, real network? And I lost a bunch of friends. But I tell people I can call them and like, hey, I'm screwed. You know, what kind of resources can we offer?
In the short run, yeah, we need to figure out like how do we pool all our money, get it all out of the system within that week before like they close the doors to jail. In the long term, we need to think about what kind of skills and services can we offer, items can we offer to other people to generate more.
Real cash. How do we cash?
Real quick, I guess made me think the third thing on my mind would be stemming ingress. So any income, where that would go. You know, like you know, when you're getting paid instead of having like a direct deposit, you know, how would that pan out?
And immediately,
or like
any
people that are always Venmoing you.
Can you still do third-party checks, like where you sign the top part and give it to somebody else and they cash it for you? No, you can't do that anymore.
I don't bank anymore.
Yeah.
No, but it would be like your company writes a check to you, you sign the top of it, you give it to somebody you know with an account.
I did have an experience where I was trying to get cash out, and they were Nazis about trying to get my cash out. I didn't close my account and get all of my cash. So
I'd be
like
pissed.
all of us trying to go to our bank on the same day. Get all
Yeah,
the
right.
cash out. It's probably
Well,
not
so
going to
I
work.
did
You
just
gotta
cash
figure
a
you're not
large
getting
check,
all of
and
the money.
what happened was I couldn't, because I didn't know that I had to call in advance and be like, can you get this money available from your bank account?
Yeah.
Use my service.
The first thing I would do is go to the bank and try and get as much out as I can. Money really counts.
Yeah.
Another thing, if you're going to be transporting that much money, you know, assuming that you're net positive, you'd also want to know
Lawyers?
no civil asset forfeiture stuff, because like they'll just, you know, as you leave the bank, they could just take your whole shit like from you.
Well, think about it. If some entity is really freezing all of our bank accounts, that's a very realistic. They're like, hey, these people are going to do something. All
We're
of them.
already
Right.
I watched
Yeah,
the
they're
whole
already
thing
gonna.
in Mexico. They took $100,000 from retired vets.
Yeah.
I ended up getting a lawyer. I think got it back, but it was crazy. They're like, "Why do you have this?" Like, I don't trust banks.
Probably got most of it back.
It's like none of your business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude,
I think we should probably, at our first meeting, figure out how to get our out of banks anyway.
Yeah, that would probably.
Well, I think
be
that's the
best
point
way
of
to
this
go.
being the prompt.
Yeah.
It's like,
This is like event 201 float.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that would be maybe like first
Anti
order of
201.
business.
Okay, so
Start it.
try and get as much out as you can. Find where to store it,
Yeah.
and not decentralize, so it's not all in the same safe, so that one safe doesn't all get hit.
The whole point
Yeah.
of this too, like, is just to identify areas where they potentially have leverage on us and moving that
Right.
leverage. Where they-
Yeah, like
Exactly.
the pooling, the centralizing instinct actually like comes into attention too.
Do
You know,
credit
as we
cards
talk.
not work either?
Sorry?
This scenario, credit cards don't work.
I'm assuming they're probably saying
Wouldn't
that
be able to have a
Where's your
bank
money?
account.
That's a good
Yeah.
question.
Where's your money on the credit card?
That's
Well, you can get the prepaid.
If it's
you know,
frozen
like
though,
our-
your credit card. will
They'll
work.
freeze the credit card. Okay, okay.
Yeah,
So assume the
Yeah,
credit card.
we said that like at most you can get.
I think we can
those gift
assume
cards
that all
like that
big
at like
banks
CVS, and you can load it with up to like $1,000 at a time. So you, I mean that would be the only way, and there's no name attached to it. They don't take
Well,
that.
you do, in order to spend them, you have to create an email account and link it to
Yeah.
I haven't tried.
Well,
Because I've done it before several times.
Right
Yeah.
now, I'm trying to do like in-person transactions and make it so you have to.
If they're talking about email and phone number, what is it? The Ramiro's above phone like actually creates like
Firewall.
no, it's like you like choose your own, so it's like a spoof to begin with, sort of.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, like Tor network stuff?
No, like literally just the phone that Ramiro's selling.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, so we get as much money out as
Yep.
we can.
We make sure,
Store it in a
yeah,
decentralized
like you were saying,
way.
make sure your employers don't pay you after those 7 days to that same
You're gonna
place.
have to contact all
The
your.
management of all of the things that you pay every single month would have to be
My
handled
PayPal,
like
my
very
Venmo, my
quickly.
Cash App, all of it has to be
All your car
unlinked.
insurance, everything that
Yeah,
you're-
that would be a shitload.
It would be a lot of work, which
Yeah.
is where we could support each other too, of making sure like, hey, did you remember to do your car insurance? Did you remember to get your
Yeah,
cell
share
phone?
the checklist.
Making sure that everybody is
Yeah.
like being as thorough as possible.
Yeah,
Any
that would be
income,
good. That would be a good
revenues.
step too. Everybody write down your expenses, like all
Yeah.
your like
The
budget.
budget.
Make sure that you have all your expenses
That's
listed
what I
out.
was
I
gonna
mean,
say.
it would
Get rid of
probably
anything you don't need.
Yeah.
other things too, like you have an IRA, that would be essentially used in this scenario as well, right? So looking at alternative accounts.
Yeah, they would freeze all financial assets.
Right,
Like
so pulling all of that as well, which is something
I mean, for even short-term income, you gotta look at like buying stuff, pooling resources until you can come up with more income.
Yeah, if there's anyone
How are
that's
you gonna get
negatives.
more income?
I would probably guess right now that I have like
Assuming that's
7 things attached to my bank account, but in reality, I probably have like 50 things
Yeah,
attached to my
that's
bank
something
account.
Over as,
Like,
yeah,
I need
as
to,
well,
like, make that
those,
list
all those
and figure out.
recurring things.
Yeah.
I actually just did that recently. You can just get a copy of your bank statement, and they will, the bank will actually, if you just call and ask for that, they'll arrange it for you so that those ones that are connected to just comes out and gets paid. We'll just highlight it on your statement for you to make it a lot easier. Yeah. Let's dig in.
I guess in the immediate short term, like if there's anything that you're gonna need to acquire, like you're yourself,
yeah, I mean, there's like falling beyond what it means to have your bank account.
Huh?
Yeah.
Why is it all happening anyway?
Yeah, so that should be identified like off rip when starting yourself. I mean, definitely it's
It's a good exercise. It kind of illuminates what.
Just a couple more minutes, guys. Choose one person to share with everybody.
Right there. You talk the most first.
I think that's
You guys get it all figured out?
Almost, kind of.
What are they saying in the chat?
It's a rough estimate.
That's all we need. That's all we
Yeah,
need.
good idea in the chat.
Yeah.
I'm
other
talking to
people
you.
in the chat.
Yeah, so it's like
Oh no shit.
Do they have feedback in the chat? That's what I was saying. Is they're giving us a good idea?
Oh, okay, yeah, we were.
No, they got nothing.
They had nothing. Come on, guys. Come on. Come on.
There's people. There's 20 people watching here and 40 people on Odyssey.
Nice.
Okay.
I like that the's more on Odyssey than YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
like what's
It's gotta be realistic.
Yeah, like how are we getting
Who has actual skills?
Because I can just do corporate.
Well, that branches into more general stuff, like outside of the scope of the prompt, I think.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, if they're talking about, someone's getting arrested, they're gonna have to go pray in Gethsemane or something.
You're gonna have to go what?
What is it? Jesus reference. It's like before he went and got crucified, like willingly did it. He like went and prayed for a little bit, and then he walked up to it.
Oh, okay.
But it was, yeah.
Right.
Well, I was just saying, someone's getting arrested.
All right, we're gonna bring it back.
We point it this way so we can kind of get everyone. Hey man, the light is coming this way.
I put it that way so we didn't have the music
You want
coming
to
in
do
the background.
blackface.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I didn't use your skills.
Thank you.
So you guys want to take your seats wherever around here.
Yeah, if y'all go back over there, we'll have someone come up so everyone can see. Ramiro's throwing me off over here.
All right, guys, come back in here if you can. And if you have whoever's speaking for the group, come over here.
Oh, come over here?
Yeah, we got a couple. So how many got? We got one. Are we missing anybody's group speaker? Group speaker? Is that group? Hey guys, you come back in. Do y'all have a group speaker y'all want to send up? If y'all haven't yet?
It's mandatory.
Mike, you coming up?
Come on, Basic.
All right, I think we got 5. All right.
This ain't Basic's first rodeo.
Yeah. All right. Okay, everybody, let's get your attention. We want you to hear just what strategies people came up with.
I'd like to hear too, like how easy was it to get on the same page and come up with some common ideas?
Okay, everybody, please bring your attention back. So yeah, go ahead, brother. Just
Okay.
share whatever you guys thought of.
I have to admit that I was participating in the generation of some of the ideas, and it seems like about half of the group I didn't hear some of the ideas from. So there's this dichotomy in the group where like me being somebody who had an idea, I had my idea, and a few others had some great ideas too. But I think that one of the things that we have to overcome is if there's somebody that has a really strong idea in the group, there has to be room for the people to express those ideas, because it didn't seem like I heard from the entire group. And I thought we had more time. I didn't realize we were out of time. So just for future, if you guys could tell us we have 10 minutes or however long it takes, like put it. I missed that part. I'm sorry, Derrick. Okay.
You're in love with that idea.
So what was that?
Right. Okay. So we're like, okay, it's down to the wire. How do we solve it? The system puts a brake on us because we can't withdraw a certain amount so fast, right? So it's like, well, there's 8 of us here. If we can withdraw this much amount, like there's a certain amount maximum that we can get out of the system because there's a certain limitation. Like, how are we going to survive on that? And then we didn't get to develop those ideas, but that was a big question that came up. There were different people that said, well, I don't even have that much money in the system, so how could I even get that much out? So it's not even a question of the maximum. It's like, who's part of the group, like, and it's proximity based. Like when our group was created, it was based on proximity. It's like something bad shit happened, we lost communication, now we're together and we're trying to solve this problem. So you don't have a lot of, it's like a type of panic almost. It's like, what are you going to do? If I look at it, there were people that were maybe ready and the people that were less ready. And you guys, please, am I missing anything important?
I mean, I thought because I have a holding company in Wyoming, I would go for real estate with a hard money loan and just buy as much real estate as possible, which doesn't hit your credit and it doesn't hit your personal name. That's what I would.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a cool thought.
But not everyone has that.
Yeah. We appreciate that.
Well,
brother.
and I'm the presenter, and I'm already divorced from those ideas highly. So, like, I didn't think of that, and I have to admit I'm the presenter. So, that's why I asked you. I'm missing something, like taking money loan or something.
Yeah.
To leverage what
People
we
start
had.
thinking outside the box.
Leverage it.
Leverage
Okay.
it all.
Leverage.
Appreciate it, brother. Cool.
Sure.
And I
Thanks,
want to
Mike.
just add to what, because Mike brought up an interesting point that, yeah, everybody is going to have different ideas, be in different places. And the idea of, oh my God, we have 7 days, panic mode sets in. But the whole idea of freedom cells is that we're practicing and doing these things ahead of time, so that when it does happen, you're not freaking out. Instead, you're like, hey guys, we've been preparing for this. We've all got backup food. We've got our money out of the banks. We've invested, you know what I mean? That's the idea. This is just sort of a prompt to get you thinking that way. So.
All right, cool. All right, so in my group, basically, like within a minute of doing this exercise, we kind of realized off rip we should probably do this right as we form a cell and not wait till like we only have 7 days, because if all of us run on the bank, depending on how much financial assets you have, if you're someone with not much, you can just pull it out the ATM, or you can maybe get it. But if you're, you know, have a lot of money, that can take the bank a while to process. We also talked about crypto and the situation in Canada with the trucker convoy, how like even people's crypto assets got seized. So we wanted to look at like which crypto wallets would be good and which ones are not, you know, so that's something we have to explore. And then,
Self-custody.
Yeah.
Self-custody?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one there. I'll write that shit down. Then we talked about also getting gift cards. The only problem with that is that you need an email and a phone number. You can obviously fake an email address, get a burner phone, or spoof the number in order to use it so it's not tied to you, and then preload those visas with cash. We talked about we definitely talked about civil asset forfeiture, like the risk of that. Yeah, so I mean, it's like we talked about investing in things like land or ammo, but like that also potentially being a problem too. So that's something we'd probably have to explore more. And then money orders, contacting. Well, I have angel investors written down here. Anything else from?
We also thought about like if it's just our bank account that we're extracting money from, maybe we still have jobs that people are direct depositing into. So like how do we then is it like paying our car insurance or our rent?
Yeah, everything would have to be anybody who has like an automatic payment set up, whether it be like your rent portal, your car insurance, or whatever. All those companies would have to get contacted, even the landlord, and like you'd have to be like, okay, I either need to pay you through the mail, or if it's somebody local, pay you in person, or you know, whatever. But it can't be an electronic transaction at all. So
Thank you. Great job. Hey, I just want to point out too with that's part of why they want things to go further digital, right? I mean, and like, for example, in Mexico where we're at, people still are writing things down in notebooks. You still pay your bills at the grocery store in person, like things that have become totally digital here. So in some cases, it would be pretty difficult to get people to go back to accepting money.
Sure. All right, everyone. So I'm representing the group over here. I was surprised with actually how quickly we reached consensus and kind of a common understanding of different ways to go about this. Sorry, hopefully y'all can hear me. I was surprised at actually how quickly we kind of reached a common understanding and agreement on what would need to be done. One of the first thoughts was credit unions, because we were told that wouldn't immediately be targeted by this hypothetical scenario, but we all agreed that we wouldn't count on that being a long-term solution. So the main ones we came up with was withdrawing cash and having that in physical form, getting precious metals, and then of course crypto would be a huge one. And so we spent some time going over like what skills each of us had on the team, what things we could bring of value, what things we could teach to each other to make sure we're investing in getting our crypto secured safely from self-custody. That might have been yours.
yeah, actually.
Yeah. Where was I? So yeah, crypto was a big answer for us, but as well as figuring out the big roadblock we saw was obviously how are we going to pay bills if we don't have digital payment methods, or how are we going to, if we put everything in crypto, how do you turn that back into fiat cash when you need it? And was that? You wouldn't want to, but if you had to, you know, through peer-to-peer networks like Local Monero, Local Bitcoin, you could actually go and sell your crypto to another person. And so we could work on figuring out what contacts we all have and leveraging that to help us establish a network where we could have our needs met. Yeah. Thank you.
And that idea of he's talking about building up that peer-to-peer network, that is to me the truest expression of doing things like crypto. So people often ask, like, all I get paid in is crypto. I pretty much, like I said earlier, don't use bank accounts. So if I need to you don't want to sell it, but say I need to deal with somebody that I'm paying rent to that doesn't quite get crypto yet, and I need to get dollars. Well, I've built up a network, part of the Freedom Cell network and just the activist community, that I have multiple people that I can call and say, hey, can I sell you some crypto for X amount of whatever? And if we're close, we can do it hand to hand, face to face, you know, no internet needed. Or if not, it's somebody I trust, maybe I'll have them send a PayPal account. That's like the one last link I have to the old system, because there are some things that you just can't pay without that. And that's, again, that's what they want it to be, where like it's hard to exist without these systems. And to the other point, he said, if everything's in crypto, how do you pay certain bills and things of that sort? This is why we need more people in the tech sector to focus on crypto to fiat payment processing systems that don't use KYC and that are willing to kind of go up against the government right now. So this is, you know, as we identify, hey, there's a potential opportunity, but we don't have those systems in place yet. So we need to create them, right? All right, can you share them?
Woo! Yeah, so our Freedom Cell, which is like the 2 benches over there, the first thing we thought about was that different people are going to have more assets, and different people are going to have easier time taking their money out of bank accounts, depending on if they have a credit union or a bank account. So obviously some people are going to have more trouble because you might have a limit on how much you can take out. So things we thought of like was to create like a community chest of some sort, like come together to help the people in the cell that can't get their money out as quickly. We can loan them money to help them pay their bills or whatever. And then we also thought about housing too. If it really created like a housing crisis for all the members, we could, if somebody had like extra space to lend one of the members of the community, we could think of something like that. We also thought of crypto. Obviously, like you could do Bitcoin or Monero. I think Monero is good because it's private, so you can't trace it. And if you teach your members how to get like your money into like Monero, or how to transfer that money from the bank to Monero, or silver rounds and everything. You take the money from your bank, you buy gold. And I think the last one is cash apps, because you can always like send money to a cash app and to get it out. But I think that was on the bottom, like way to exchange money, because that's obviously traced. But those are our solutions. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. First of all, this is our Freedom Cell over here under this canopy. I want to thank our benevolent overlords for actually giving us 7-day heads up that our bank accounts are about to be shut down. Because that's you got to get a little right. So, given that we have this amazing 7-day window, we would immediately, like so many of these guys, run on the banks, immediately just pull everything, every which way out of the thing, and then from the community chest idea. You know, we were like, well, we don't want this to be a communist utopia where we're all sharing the same. Like, hey, you didn't put in your fair share. So basically, as a group, we want to kind of diversify the collective assets that we have. Some people might be heavier in one versus another, but collectively, we're thinking about 50% crypto. Bitcoin's nice, but there's a basket of good ones. And then a solid like 25% precious metals, silver, gold, but with the silver, especially the rounds. So like when you're going to buy eggs, you're not shaving off that gold bar. You can actually use a couple, like they're usable in reality, not just like a store of value. And then of course, a nice pile of dirty slave money, fiat dollars. So when and if we need to do that, great. Step 2 is a bug out plan, which is more about geography. Like if we don't feel like, you know, if the banks are shutting us out now, then what's the next thing that they're going to do? So are we going to be safe for all neighbors now? But is this physical place, geography we're at, going to be safe? If not, move somewhere where it would be defensible in the future. And then if it's fine here, boom, we keep it here. Having at least a 6-month supply of food. Again, if the banks are shut down, what's next? Having access to farm equipment, seeds, you know, just resources that you need to physically grow and become sustainable, which includes land and of course water. Finally, kind of an external thing we were thinking about is how do we, you know, everyone's social credit scores around us are going to get dinged if they interact with us. So how do we like maybe teach or show people like externally, kind of a mutual aid, share the knowledge of what we did, so we create allies in the community around us, and then also make sure we have some kind of encrypted network for communication amongst ourselves, because if the banks are gone today, everything else is gone tomorrow. So just being prepared for all eventualities. Perfect.
Thank you guys for participating in that. Appreciate you.
I just wanted to give a couple insights that I picked up just hearing people's feedback. One, from, you know, the idea that some people don't input their ideas, right? So two things on that. If you're a leader or you have more of a alpha predominant personality, good leaders make sure that everyone's voice is heard, because it's easy if you have a strong personality to kind of push things your way, right? This is something I'm personally conscious of in the leadership that I do. I'm trying more and more to be aware and make sure everybody's voice is heard. But on the flip side, let us all take personal responsibility to ensure our voice is heard by putting our input in and not being afraid to speak up. It makes it easier when we're all on the same page with the common mission. Like, we're all in this together, so there shouldn't be any reason why one person can't share their thoughts, their feelings, their opinions. Also, let us all be consciously aware that there are some people that haven't done the trauma work that are very difficult to get along with. So in those instances, there's two options. One, ideally, we try to work with them. We turn them on to some healers. We turn them on to some processes, some frameworks. But at the end of the day, if they just can't get it straight, there's no shame in cutting somebody that's disruptive from your group, right? Okay, another thing, there are all sorts of decision-making frameworks that we can utilize. One of them that I'm very interested in is called Sociocracy. There's a woman named Diana Leaf Christian. She wrote the book on intentional community. She's going to be presenting at the Land Summit, exitandbuildlandsummit.com. Join us in person, or you can watch it live, the stream. And it's basically, it's a methodology for making decisions. And the type of methodology would ensure that there's ample opportunity for everyone to have their voice heard. Then you come back and revisit. It's a really great horizontal way of decision making as opposed to vertical. And then the final thing is, what this hypothetical that we just laid out about a year ago or 6 months ago, if we laid out that hypothetical, some people would be like, oh yes, sure, let's play that out, but that's highly unlikely. That just literally happened in a Western democracy just north of here. Some of you may even be from Canada. So the important thing is, don't get caught with your pants down scrambling to come up with a solution. Preemptively anticipate that this type of thing can or will happen, and stack your deck and play the cards so that you're not caught in a situation where you have to make a decision that you don't want to. And on that same note, go ahead and start doing projects with your Freedom Cell group so y'all can get a feel for each other. So it's not a situation where we're like, holy crap, how are we going to survive when we're locked out of our bank account? This is happening next week, but you've already started growing the garden together, working on the communication channels, things that aren't risky, things that aren't life or death. You have that connection, you have that chemistry amongst yourselves. So the whole idea, and one of the purposes of that exercise, is to kind of light a fire under your behinds. If you don't have that type of group, if you're not engaging in that type of thinking and preparedness, just like planting a tree, the best time to do it was 20 years ago. Anybody know the next best time to plant a tree? Right now. Same thing with the Freedom Cell Network. It's great if you already had one, but if not, get started right away. All right, cool. Before we wrap up, I want to do a group picture.
I want to mention one other thing, just to throw it what John said, and to kind of touch on again that we constantly hear from so many people who are interested, but there's different things holding them back. A lot of the thing is they're waiting for somebody else to step up to the plate. Even in our community of free thinking, truth seeking people, there's a lot of followers, and I'm not like really hating. I'm just saying there are people who are sometimes waiting to see somebody else do things first. Miriam and I saw this at the Greater Reset. People would come up to us and say, hey, it'd be so great if there was this workshop happening. And we say, great, let us know where it's going to be at and we'll promote it. And they say, no, I'm not the kind of person that does those things. Like me, I should be. We're waiting for each of you to step up to the plate and share your gifts with us. Like, that's what we really need. Don't let fear be the thing that holds you back. And again, the other thing is, in my experience, all people sometimes say, like, how do you do all this work without being worried they're going to come attack you or whatever things you could get lost in? The way I see it is, the more proactive I am, the less reason there is to be afraid. If I wasn't doing anything, and if I knew all this stuff was going on, but I was just sitting still in fear, then I probably would be kind of afraid. I'd be like, oh my God, I'm not prepared. I can't take care of myself. I can't take care of my family. But the more proactive I am, the less reason I find to be afraid. Does that make sense? So the more active we are, the less fear we have to have. So thank you guys so much for sharing. We're going to get a group picture. Thank you guys for being here.
Hey, you guys, just wanted to mention again, I'm got my booth over here. We're above phone. I mentioned earlier, it's important to have secure hardware that you're using, whether it's your laptop or your phone. So definitely come check it out. And yeah, would love to share more with you. I'm also speaking tomorrow.
Come see him. Last thing, one last thing. I'm about to go perform my hip hop set. It's 33. Come check me out in like 10 minutes.
right, let's go. We're gonna give you a giant selfie.
Baby, come help with the picture. She's good at this.
All right, everybody come close right there.
Squeeze up in.
Trying to be on the front of these two big blue things, but not beyond them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we got it. We love Elon. Freedom on 3. 1, 2, 3. Freedom!
Jeez, John. Thank you guys.
What's the next one?
I literally ran down there twice to find you, and then I was like, oh no, never moved. And yeah. Do I get some mini drinks? Oh,
I mean, I thought when I came down, I made stop, but I just stopped.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Peace.
John, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks guys.